Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this adult forum that focuses on Episcopal legal aid of the Diocese of Pennsylvania, headed up by Steve Chihuahua. And I am thrilled to introduce him. He is my colleague and president of the Episcopal legal aid of the Diocese of Pennsylvania, and tapped me to be on the board, and it has been a pleasure to serve with and for him in this wonderful endeavor. I met Steve, I guess, after I had returned from seminary and restarted my work with the diocese, and Steve was then chairing, I think, the Committee on Constitution and Canons, and he has this great ability to cut to the heart of any legal matter, explain it all so anyone can understand it, handle every question with ease and enthusiasm and even imagination sometimes. He is a joy to work with. But he came to a point at his work with McElroy, Deutsch, Mulvaney, and Carpenter as a lawyer that he started thinking about what he wanted to do in his retirement. And this notion, this development of Episcopal legal aid came to him. He planned for it immaculately. He had everything lined up. He knew who he wanted to corral to serve on the board of directors. He pursued us happily, joyfully, and enticed us to work with him. And it has been a wonderful 3 years. Steve goes to where he wants to cultivate his clients. You can find him at St. Luke's Germantown when they have their weekly luncheon for seniors, or at St. James School when they have their community table. Steve is there welcoming those who need his assistance. And as Peter said, he goes to where the need is. This is critical because many wouldn't necessarily be able to get into Center City, wouldn't know whom to consult for whatever legal matters that they have. And Steve, carefully as a companion, walks everyone through their dilemmas and hopefully brings them to a satisfactory and satisfying resolution. So I give to you, Steve Chihuahua.
Thank you very much, Joanne. Any questions from everybody? I think I don't have anything to add to that. I think that was really great.
You know what? I do need to say this, Steve, about you, because this is something we're highlighting in this particular series. What you have done and what you exemplify for all of us is the creative use of the gifts God has given you in supporting each other and our world. That is a part of the mission statement of Church of the Redeemer. And it's something that speaks to my heart because it suggests our vocation. This is what Steve has been called to do. This is who Steve Chihuahua is. I give you Steve Chihuahua.
All right, well, I really am done. I can't possibly compete with that. I'm going to actually, I was in church live at the 9:30 service today to hear Joanne preach. And for those of you who heard her talk about the common good and how diverse gifts are given to people from the Holy Spirit and they come together, I think Episcopal legal aid is an excellent representation of that. I am the point person, and I'll tell you a little bit about how we got going and about what my role is, but you'll hear in the course of this the contributions of a large number of people, including Joanne, who is a great member of our board of directors, and all of you at the Redeemer who have provided us with financial support, both through your outreach committee and individually, and also a good deal of encouragement. I used to go over when the building was being worked on and meet with Joanne in the satellite office across the street, and then Peter would pop his head in, and Michael, and so I really feel as though I've been gotten a lot of encouragement from clergy and members of Redeemer since the beginning. I'm not going to have a lot of audience participation here, but I want to do one thing first of all. This just involves a show of hands from you all. Could everybody raise their hands if you have a will? And I hope I'm going to get everybody's hand up, because if not, we have a separate conversation we have to have about that. And those of you who have a will, which of you went to a lawyer, paid a lawyer, maybe as part of an estate planning system that you did, And then how many of you tapped a friend or a colleague or a relative or someone you know from a club or something and got them? I have a lot of cousins, so I wind up writing a lot of wills for no charge, and did it that way. Perhaps a couple of you did that. These are the ways that we get wills done. If we have limited economic means, neither of these options is commonly available to us. And so because wills tend to be not an immediate issue and not at the forefront of any concern that we have and not part of our daily lives, we don't get a will. And, you know, there are worse things in the world than not having a will, but this is a particular problem in the lower income communities of Philadelphia because you may not have much money, but you probably own a house. Houses in the 30s, 40s, and 50s were built by the hundreds of thousands. Picture the Northeast, picture South Philly, picture West Philadelphia, picture all that. We don't have like massive apartment complexes the way they do in New York and Chicago and other cities. There's an awful lot of homeownership out there, and a lot of people who did not provide for what would happen to their house when they passed away. And so now, 50, 75, 100 years after the house was purchased, we have people who are living in homes, tens of thousands of them by one survey that I saw in the city, that don't actually own, their name isn't on the deed. And they can live in the house and they can pay the taxes and they can pay insurance. But what they can't do is sell the property. They can't get a loan. They can't get a mortgage. They can't pay delinquent bills. Liens are put on the houses. And it's a way more complicated issue to untangle. In fact, there's a legal term for this. It's called tangled title. It's how tough it is. That would easily be addressed if people had left a will in the first place and the will had been probated. There are all kinds of other issues that people who have economic challenges face that are more immediate than that. Landlord, they're evicted from their apartments. They're denied Social Security benefits. They have family law questions. They want to have custody of their child, or they're sued. They want to. They've been sold a lemon of a car, and they want to deal with it. So what do? So there is legal aid. And legal aid by the, legal aid organizations are not, there are many of them, and they tend to fall into two general categories. There is legal aid that is in the form of sort of a public interest law firm with a paid staff of lawyers. People have experience and don't have experience, and they have areas of expertise, and they have offices in the city. The big one, the big organization that is state and federally sponsored is called Legal Aid of Southeastern Pennsylvania in the counties, and it's known as Community Legal Services in the city. And they have offices in Norristown and in Media and in Chester and in the city in downtown Philadelphia. And there are other specialty services. There's immigration lawyers and elder lawyers and disabled persons lawyers who all sort of follow this model of a staff in an office. And then there are other organizations that rely on volunteers. The Bar Association in Philadelphia sponsors something called Philadelphia VIP, and they recruit volunteer corporate attorneys to give some time and effort on a case. They also have a Center City office. And the issue with all of these legal aid services, who serve thousands and thousands of clients a year, is that there are barriers to getting to them. That creates a substantial issue in terms of meeting up the lawyers and the service. I'm going to try to share my screen here. We'll see if that works and show you. That's me. There I am. And let's see here. Yes. Here we go. Yes. We all see me. Here's our mission. So the mission of Episcopal Legal Aid is to promote access to justice by bringing pro bono civil legal services to low-income residents of Philadelphia and surrounding counties. And I highlight the word bringing because that turns out to be the key innovation that we do that other legal aid doesn't do, getting to this issue of the barriers to access. So about 3 years ago, Legal Aid of Southeastern Pennsylvania commissioned this study from Temple as to why it was that people were not, they noticed that their door was swinging wide open, but not being broken down the way they figured it should be by people clamoring for legal aid. And by surveying legal aid clients, Temple came up with this sort of list of problems that people encountered in trying to get to the legal aid offices in downtown Philadelphia or Chester or wherever they are. They don't know about them. They don't feel comfortable entering a legal system that may have treated them poorly in other respects over the years. They can't literally find a bus or 2 buses or 3 buses that will get them to the offices. Offices are only open in a limited amount of time, particularly due to federal and state budgetary cutbacks and just issues with funding. Legal aid offices tend to only have a limited intake. You have to call them on a Wednesday morning, or they're only open in person on a Friday, that kind of a thing. They also means test. So if you make too much money, you can't use their services. And the standard is pretty low. It's about 150 to 200% of the poverty line. The poverty line, is not a big number. It depends on how many people you have. But a lot of people can't access legal aid because they make just slightly too much money. And then there are other things that are on the list here. So I'm going to leave you with the conundrum of how we get around these barriers and talk to you a little bit about Episcopal Legal Aid's approach, which requires me to talk about me, which is one of my favorite subjects to talk about. But I'll try to be brief, especially because Joanne did such a great job of telling you about me to begin with. I'm a lawyer. I grew up in Lower Merion Township. I worked for several corporate law firms, starting with Drinker Biddle, what was then called Drinker Biddle and Reith in the city, and then moved to some smaller firms. And by merger, we wound up at a big firm. I used to say we're big in Jersey, McElroy, Deutsch, Mulvaney, and Carpenter. And our Center City office was in the Suburban Station building, and we had about 25 lawyers, and I practiced various aspects of corporate litigation, insurance coverage, and environmental stuff, and products liability, and construction law, and a bunch of things like that. But I have no particular background in legal aid law, other than volunteering that I did over the years for a couple of organizations. But I was turning, in 2018, I was turning 60. And I had decided for several years that I didn't want to I wanted to try something new, because I'd always done the same job since I graduated from law school, basically. And if I were going to try something new, whether it be just a different kind of law, maybe setting up my own practice, maybe doing something that was law related but not in a law firm, this was really, the window was closing to have an opportunity to do that. Plus, the kids were out of the house, the mortgage was paid, my wife is still working. Financially, we could afford to have Steve indulge in his, midlife crisis if that was something that worked out. So I was kind of casting about for an idea about that. Separately, I have off and on done legal work for the diocese over a bunch of years. So I was the chancellor of the diocese for a while and did some other things. And at the time in 2018, as Joanne mentioned, I was chair of which I still am, the Canons Committee of the diocese, which in turn gets me to be the parliamentarian at our annual diocesan convention, which is a job I'm not even sure I know what the duties of the parliamentarian are, except that you do get to sit there and say, you're out of order a lot to people, which is very satisfying sometimes. But for purposes of our narrative here, gets me sitting next to the bishop of the diocese every year at the annual convention so that I can whisper legal advice in his ear should it become necessary, which it should almost never does. This is a bit of a challenge for me because there's a lot of downtime at convention. If you've ever been to convention, there's a lot of sitting around. And with a lot of bishops, you can just sort of turn to them at that point and say, like, what's new? What's going on? Like, I don't know if any of you knew Bishop Clifton Daniel, but really all you had to do was kind of tap him on the shoulder and then sit back for an hour, and he would tell you everything about what was going on and his kids and his family and the state of the world, and that was great. Bishop Gutierrez, our current bishop, could not be a lovelier person and could not be more dedicated to our diocese. But a small talker, he is not. And so we're sort of like having these awkward silences a little bit, which I'm not used to. And I'm sort of figuring I need to come up with more chat topics here to kind of get us through the day. And then in 2018, he was launching an initiative of his, which were wellness centers. So the theory about wellness centers was there were a lot of parishes in the diocese that weren't getting a lot of use during the week. And let's put them to use by partnering with nurses, nursing schools and medical schools and hospitals, and getting medical practitioners into the parishes during the week and setting up, maybe it was a blood pressure testing area or a mental health screening or various health services that could be provided at no charge that would get people from the community into the churches and get the churches being used during the week, which could have benefits, a lot. So he had made this presentation and there was a video and stuff during the convention. And so I just kind of turned to him offhand and I said, so have you thought about doing legal services also? And he said some, I don't remember exactly what they were, but some encouraging things. And we were sort of kind of off and running, because then I had a focus for my thinking about what would I like to do after 60 years old. The wellness services have been launched. There are some around the diocese, but as it turns out, many of our parishes were open during the week for an even better initiative, or not initiative, a better thing for use for partnering with legal services, which was distributing food. And so we must have a good quarter of the diocese parishes who do some sort of food distribution, or at least pre-pandemic, did some sort of food distribution, whether they served a meal in their standard, church basement with a kitchen kind of operation, or they handed out food on a Saturday, or that was either cooked on the spot or some sort of a lunch and something like that. So, and so there we were. So from 2018 to 2019, I spent some time refining the idea that we might open a legal clinic associated with the food distribution activities that were already going on in parishes around the diocese. So we tested it out, and we discovered that there were really three elements that were important. One was like a motivated legal staff, which was me, obviously. I brought a few things to the table that were helpful in addition, not particularly my legal skills, which were not all that related to, the areas that family law and landlord-tenant and even trust and estates, other than writing wills for my cousins. But having worked at a small firm, I had a certain basic understanding of like the economics of how a law firm works. And the whole point of Episcopal Legal Aid, which we'll talk about a little bit more, is to see how inexpensively and how much we can deconstruct the law firm and still provide good legal services to get away from all those barriers that we were looking at before. All these things that prevent people from getting to legal aid have to do with the fact that the lawyer is in downtown Philadelphia and the client is not. And so what do we, if we don't have the lawyer in downtown Philadelphia, if we have the lawyer sitting in the basement of the church, what does the lawyer need in order to provide good legal services, but not have to have if we're cutting out the office and we're cutting out the transportation and all that sort of thing. Also, and not incidentally, I knew a thing or two about how to raise some money. Not that I'm any great expert, but my home parish is St. Asaph's in Bala Cynwyd. And I have served them as warden for a while, and then also chair of one or more fundraising committees. So I knew a couple of things about how to raise money. I didn't know anything about how to raise money from foundations, but I knew a few things about how to hold a fundraiser and do things to get money from individuals, because obviously we were going to need to raise some money. The diocese, the bishop very kindly provided us with some seed money at the very beginning that came out of his discretionary fund. But the diocese, in fairness to it, is not particularly set up to support missions of this type. And I have not succeeded in obtaining additional funding from the diocese, although we have not given up hope about that. But at the moment, we are funded primarily by parishes, individual parishes like like Church of the Redeemer. St. David's is another one. St. Thomas and White Marsh is another one. Individuals and private foundations. We need a community gathering place. Well, that was going to be the church basements and the church parish halls. And then the third element is, and this is of critical importance, to connect me to the clients. It's not enough to just plunk yourself down somewhere, I think. I mean, there are plenty of places where communities gather. There are Walmarts and supermarkets and Social Security benefit offices. And a lawyer can like set up a card table there and ask for business and probably is not going to get much. You need a trusted intermediary. And this is where I credit the clergy of the diocese for their sort of genius. Not only were they largely the ones that support and set up the food distribution centers at their parishes, but they're the ones who, when I call them up and say, in 5 minutes or less, what it is that I do, say to me, when can you come by? They don't say to me, well, can you send me some literature on this? They don't say to me, well, we're a little crowded right now, let us get back to you. They don't say to me, maybe they should, they don't say to me, let me run this by my vestry. They basically say to me, come by, we'll talk, let's see where we can put your table, and then we're off and running. And so, starting with the 2019 convention, a year later, we were off and running. So let me show you some pictures of what we have done in the last 2 years. So one of our early sites was the cathedral at 38th and Chestnut, which before the pandemic, every Monday held a food pantry. So as you may know, if you've been there, they took out their pews a number of years ago. So they have this big sort of empty space. And in the back, they would set up these tables. That's this upper left corner here. And people would come, and there would be over 100. And they could all come inside pre-pandemic, and they would all get a chair, and they would all get a number. And then when their turn came, they would walk around the tables and shop and pick what they need. And if they needed a frozen chicken, that was over here. If they needed some bread, that was here. If they needed some vegetables, that was here. You see the bread lined up on the upper right-hand corner here. Meanwhile, while they were waiting, and that's them in the lower left, I was up front, literally with a card table and a sign and a little screen to provide a little bit of privacy. And people would wander over and they would talk to me about their legal issues. There was advanced publicity. They would know I was going to be there. Many would bring papers for me to look at. We didn't invest in a lot of equipment. I meant to bring it with me, but the best investment we made was in this portable scanner, which is a device that it's about that big, and it attaches to a laptop, and you can scan documents. So people bring, and it's kind of heartbreaking, they bring the eviction notice that's been taped to their door. They bring, notices of denial of benefits from Social Security that are like still in their window envelope. They bring these documents they've been carrying around for several years, sometimes while they've been sleeping in tents that may be kind of waterlogged and a little stuck together. It's a great scanner. It handles all this stuff, puts it on my laptop so that I can have a 5 or 10 minute conversation with somebody, kind of get the gist of their issue, get some contact information about them, read the material that they left me, or do a little research, and then call them up later in the week and have a further conversation. So we were doing this at the cathedral. We started in St. Luke's in Germantown very early on. We were in Norristown at a place called the Hospitality Center, which is in a building that they rent from the diocese, which, as you know, is now located in Norristown, and provides a day shelter for homeless people. And we got a good 4 months going, which was really fortuitous, that we were able to kind of get up and running and figure out what worked and didn't work, and what kind of volume of clients we were getting, and who was coming, and what kind of problems were we getting. And all that was actually, it could have been that nobody showed up. It could have been that 1 million people showed up. It could have been a lot of questions that were just impossible to answer. It could have been a lot of boring stuff. It was really none of that. It was really amazing that we had a good number of people, but not too many. And I was also, something that I didn't realize until late in the game, until we were just ready to set up, was this. When I went to law school, you went to law school and you went to class a lot, and you hung out in the pubs in the evening and other things. Nowadays, when you go to law school, you have to produce evidence that you worked for maybe 50 hours for a legal aid clinic, for some other form of pro bono law, before they will let you graduate. And so most law students would get some kind of internship with one of the several legal aid groups in the city, and they would go to their offices and file things and maybe do some intake and maybe sit in on meetings and do legal research and so on and so forth. And then the pandemic came in the end of February, the beginning of March of 2020, and all these law clinics said to all these students, well, we're closed. We're not open. We can't accommodate you. Don't come. And all the law students said to them, yeah, but I still need 10 more hours or they won't let me graduate in May. It's March. So maybe I should have gotten my hours earlier, but I didn't. So what am I going to do? And then the Episcopal Legal Aid steps in, and Episcopal Legal Aid says, well, we're remote to begin with. We don't have an office. What we need are people to do legal research on these questions that clients are coming and asking that Steve Chihuahua doesn't know the answer to off the top of his head, which is most of them. But you can go do your legal research, on your own time, on your home computer, in the computer at the library at school with your mask on, and you can just give me, the answer. And that's a great system. And so it turns out that the law students were delighted to do that, and that has been a very good system that we have continued until now. So this coming semester, because here we are in January, I'm going to have 4 law students from Penn and from Drexel. And the numbers have varied from 3 to 6 over the course of the semester. The only issue is they're good when they're good, which, coming up is January to March. And then April 1st is going to come along, and I'm still going to have cases, and they're suddenly going to have exams. And, my ability to access them is going to be a little more limited. But when they're around, they're a tremendous boon, and they've come, in various parts of the pandemic. We've gotten them to come to depositions with me. We've gotten them to do clinics. Certainly, they've come and done intake. And, one of these days we're going to be loosening up even more, and I hope to get them in the court and things like that. So it's been a great partnership. But other than that, but of course, as I've started to say, the pandemic did happen in March of 2020, and we had to rethink our operations a little bit. But as it turned out, not a whole lot. So if there was anything good about the pandemic, it was that it started in March. And so that by the end of April, when parishes were pivoting and figuring out how to continue to distribute food during a pandemic, the weather was turning pretty nice. And so a lot of their solutions were to move their operation outdoors. And they wouldn't cook a meal anymore, but they would bag it up, or they wouldn't, or you could come, so you could come outdoors into their parking lot, and they would hand you food that way. And Episcopal Legal Aid could still be there and do our basic intake. So here we are in the upper left-hand corner at St. Mary's in Ardmore, where people would drive in and get a bag or a box of food in their trunk. And that was perfect. That's perfect for legal aid intake, because they're waiting in a car. They roll down their window. I would hand them a clipboard. They would record some information for me. They would tell me, about the case while I stood a socially distanced 6 feet away. And then I call them up later in the week, and we talk some more. So that was a very good system. In the upper right here, we're in Norristown, where the hospitality center set up a tent in the back parking lot, where I, under this tent here, could socially distance from a client here. The diocesan headquarters is on the other side of these trees back here, so we're really in the shadow of the diocese. But this is very good, because with my sign up, people were walking along the street and would just see the sign and come by, so that was very nice. In the lower left-hand corner is St. Luke's in Germantown, where I strung my sign on top of 2 graves. I did discuss with the rector there, David Morris, whether that was going to offend anybody if I plunked myself down on top of graves. But it's very hard at St. Luke's, and I know Redeemer has, you don't have to walk literally through the graveyard to get to church, but St. Luke's, you literally do have to step on over people in order to get into the parish hall, and that's sort of the way it's set up. So he gave me his blessing to have me like set up a couple of chairs over somebody's tomb, and that's what we did. As people lined up to the right here to get into the parish hall for a food bag, they would sit down and talk to me here. The great thing about St. Luke's in Germantown is at exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, their bells go off, and they're really loud, and they're really right there. So we all take like a 2-minute meditation at 9 o'clock, and nobody talks or anything until the bells go off. But then it was lovely to chat with people there. And in the lower right, some of you I think have been there. St. James School had really been thinking about ways to engage with their community more and more when the pandemic hit. And for them, they used the pandemic as a way to do a community food distribution that they hadn't done before. So on 33rd Street, they set up a bunch of tents, and I got one. And then what's not in the shot here is a whole set of boxes of food that are right here on the street. And while people were picking up their box of food, they would come and talk to me. So I wanted to show you a couple more things more quickly. In Point Breeze, there's a little church called St. Simon the Cyrenian. That's 22nd and Reed Street. They are sponsored by St. Mark's in Center City, much like you at Redeemer sponsor a number of other churches to do a food ministry. And so St. Mark supplies the food, and St. Simon provides the location and the card table. And I said, this is literally the entire patch of green in a South Philly, location here. So they've given it to me, and I share it with the air conditioner, which on this 100-degree day was running, but we were still able to have a lovely conversation here, and I was able to take down some info with this lovely person that I was helping out. Darby is very interesting. So Darby is a mission that is sponsored by the diocese and run by Doris Rajagopal, who is a vicar, who is a priest in the diocese, and works without a building. So there is no permanent church in Darby. The diocese rents a row house out of which Doris can have her offices, and I go every other week to meet with clients and things like that. But mostly Doris works out of the Darby Recreation Center, which shares a parking lot. Over here is the police station. So it's an interesting partnership between the rec center and the police station in this large parking lot. Pre-pandemic, on the left, they hosted a monthly dinner for the community, and this was the group that came. And 2 or 3 or 4 people from this group would come over and talk to me in a space that we had sort of in the next room over. After the pandemic, they moved to a food distribution, not a dinner. This is not me. This is the person distributing food. This is me in the background. And in the parking lot, while people would get food, they would come and talk to me also. So we worked really just fine during the pandemic. And St. James, which I mentioned earlier, has a farmer's market on the left that I go to. On the right, this is me just last month in their basement kind of classroom area. I did an adult education program on how to make a will, circling back to the will area. So we had about 7 people in the picture here to whom I gave some basic information about what a will is like, what it looks like, what you do with a will. And then they are calling me now to sort of set up times when I can do a will for them. And so that's a service, particularly in the winter, that we are happy to provide because we can be indoors, which is really nice. So this is a list of where we were last year. 6 places in Philadelphia, 2 sites in Delaware County, and 3 in Montgomery County. I've just been talking to the rector of Christ Church in Pottstown this week about participating in their food ministry out in Pottstown. So we're always looking for new sites. The cathedral suspended operations during the pandemic. They were hoping to open this very weekend coming up. They put that off a little bit, but I think that's going to happen fairly soon. I have intersected with people from Redeemer at St. Gabriel's in Hunting Park when you are there on Saturday mornings. When I next go there this spring, I hope to bring people from a group called Esperanza I think it's Esperanza Immigration Services that also operate out of Hunting Park. And we're planning to do a presentation to the St. Gabriel's community on immigration issues. And so we're just, again, that was going to be in January, we thought, and now, March. I want to get it in before Lent gets going. So we're hoping to do that in March, but that'll get done. In Booth Wynn in Delaware County last year, I was able to do this online by Zoom. This was very good. We did an immigration clinic for the Church of Trinity, Booth Wynn. That's actually, I just realized this was not planned, but that's my mug. They gave me this mug. They're a largely immigrant community from Kenya. And they had a ton of immigration questions for me when I visited them directly. So I said, let me get somebody who knows more than I do. And so we've been able to do these partnerships with other organizations. I'm running out of time, so I'll just finish by saying, thanks to the support of Redeemer and others, we've been able to hold 140 clinics at these locations over the course of 2 years, mostly on a monthly basis. We've done 419 cases as of the end of December. 1 in 5 people want a will or have some other estate questions. Sometimes they're the beneficiary of a will, but they haven't been able to access that information. But mostly it's people who want a will or a medical directive or a power of attorney. Landlord-tenant issues are common, people being evicted. So we've gone to court a number of times to help people who are being evicted. I'm due in court on Wednesday in Norristown with a woman who is not an eviction. She is complaining that her apartment is infested and has mold and other issues, and so she's brought a suit. So we get those as well. Family law questions, employment benefits. It appears to be not uncommon, particularly during the pandemic, for people to get in the same day a letter saying they qualified for unemployment benefits because when they had to leave their job for a COVID-related reason, that was legitimate. And then on the same day, they get a letter that says, but you're denied your benefits because you also have to be able to prove that you're available for work. And because you left because of a COVID reason, you can't work. And that turns out to really not be true for most people. They may have left at one time, but the COVID issue passed in a matter of a few weeks or something like that, and they're ready and willing to work. And so I participated in hearings over the phone with hearing officers where we've been successful in making that case a number of times. We have real estate issues. This is the Tangled title I was talking about. And gosh, just litigation and all sorts of other things that come up. 40% of the time we're doing some research and answering a question, but we do all sorts of other services. We review documents for people. We write wills. Preparing documents is usually writing a will. We go to these hearings to obtain benefits. And then in 10% of the cases, I'll make a referral, whether it's to the immigration lawyers I know, or a personal injury lawyer, or a benefits attorney. So we definitely are interested in collecting a network of referrals of lawyers. I ask everywhere I go for people to, I think it's a nice screen, to go to our website at episcopallegalaid.org. You'll see right on the home screen a place to donate either funds or time, and that will take you to a form you can fill out, which will lead to an email to me. And then I will have people's names on file for when we get a case that might be appropriate. And of course, as I say, we welcome donations. You can also just get more information about what Episcopal Legal Aid is up to. We have a couple of videos about our work. We have a calendar which shows where we are. And we are looking forward in 2022 to continuing doing what we're doing, expanding to a few more sites. I would like to hire a full-time staff person this year and begin a transition to retiring, in my case, in 3 to 5 years. And also to, create a legal aid organization that really survives me and that performs. I think we've established the model. The model works. It's a useful thing. Going back to Joanne's sermon this morning, is a diverse collection of individual gifts that we have brought together under one roof. And now I would like to see us grow and become more permanent in the years to come. I don't know if I left any time for questions or comments from anybody, but I'm delighted to stay on and answer any questions or talk further about anything people want to bring up. I'm really so happy that you all came and listened to me natter on about things, and I'm, as I say, really grateful to Redeemer for all your support over the past 2 years. So thank you all very much.
Are there any questions for Steve? And Steve, you can manage this, I suppose, right?
If somebody wants to raise a hand or something, I'm looking in the chat. We have two questions. While people are thinking, there are two questions. Well, there's some nice comments in the chat. Somebody says, are the Philadelphia law firms helpful in providing pro bono talent such that the next Steve Chihuahua might be found? No, not so much. The legal aid community has been very helpful in providing sort of legal support. I'm currently in a little bit of a snit with the Philadelphia Bar Foundation, which is the snit is too strong a word, but the Bar Foundation is the charitable arm of the Bar Association. And they were going to build a building that was going to house the various legal aid agencies in Philadelphia until it turned out that nobody was much interested in having a building built for them. They couldn't do it very inexpensively. And then there was the pandemic and everybody realized that we don't really need a building anyway. So they're in the process of pivoting their resources to something that they call community lawyering, which should be right up our alley. So I am trying to insinuate myself and our organization into their planning process, and thereby also get on their radar for the next funding cycle when they fund organizations. So, so they have a consultant that I've been talking to. I also have the executive director has been very kind to me. So I'm hoping that through that, we will tap into the Philadelphia bar community. But I do feel, in a sense, I feel badly. I feel that if I have somebody who comes to help me, they may not take a case with Philadelphia VIP, which is the Philadelphia Bar Association's charitable volunteer lawyer arm. And so I feel as though I don't want to really compete with other people for the limited use of legal services. So people do come to me through the Episcopal community. Usually, I met a lawyer from St. James School who does real estate law, and I've met other lawyers that way. And that's really my best source of referral information. But I'm happy to take them from any source possible.
Is there a question from Carol Soltis in the chat?
There's the beginning of a question, but
actually, no, I was just putting in the chat what a wonderful thing you've done in founding this. It's really brilliant and great, and I'm so glad to learn about it. And I hope we have ways here at Redeemer to help you more. So thank you very much.
Carol, we'll invite you to the next fundraiser.
Okay.
It'll be in the fall, right, Steve?
Exactly. Yes. Yes. So we are funded through the Christmas fair from Redeemer, and we have our own fundraiser in the fall that more than one Redeemer person has come to, and we'll certainly spread the word about when that will be again this fall. We had it at St. Asaph's this past year, and the plan in the summer was to have it in our parish hall. As the fall proceeded, it became a better idea to have it outdoors. And then, like people who were holding weddings throughout the area in the fall, we became all weather experts. You know, what's the weather going to be like on the day of our outdoor fundraiser? It was gorgeous, and so we really feel we got a real bit of Holy Spirit in action that day. But I don't know if we'll tempt fate again a second time, but we will have some sort of fundraiser.
Good, happy to help.
Thank you.
Anything else for the good of the order? All right. Well, thank you, Steve. I will see you January the 18th.
That is our next board meeting. I thank you particularly to Joanne and to Michael for doing all these arrangements. Michael, quite the jack of all trades this morning. You know, I saw him in church, and then on the technical side and so on. You got a real talent there for sure. And then Joanne has just been such a joy to work with, and such an inspiration, and a real, not to mention with all her many inside knowledge of the diocese, very helpful with so many things. And thank you all again one last time for your time today and for your general enthusiasm for our work. And we will try to do you proud in the months to come.
Great. Thank you all for coming.
Have a lovely day. Thank you, everybody.
You too. Bye.
Thank you so much. You're wonderful.
Thank you.